Studies Section 11. Hypothesis Testing in Political Science Research. Introduction. A research work is meaningless if there is no pre-stated research hypothesis. It is the hypothesis that will serve as the searchlight while the theory serves as the footpath to a successful research outcome. In the light of this lecture will examine what a good hypothesis entails, how to formulate it, and how to test it. Objectives. At the end of this lecture, students should be able to 1. Formulate a good hypothesis and discuss the procedure to be taken in testing it. 2. Improve your research competence in the area of hypothesis testing. Pretext. To be taken before reading the lecture note. 1. Identify the dependent variable in this hypothesis. Women are like to vote than men. A. Women. B. Likelihood of voting. C. Men. D. Sex. 2. A hypothesis that is tautological is that which is A. True by definition. B. Strong in tone. C. Easy to understand. D. None of the above. 3. A proposition formulated for the sole purpose of rejecting or nullifying based on the result of a statistical test is called A. A first hypothesis. B. A good hypothesis. C. A rejected hypothesis. D. A null hypothesis. 4. If a null hypothesis is rejected when in fact it is true, the researcher is said to have committed A. Type 1 error. B. Type 2 error. C. Type 3 error. D. Type 4 error. 5. Rejecting a null hypothesis when in fact it is false is A. Type 2 error. B. Right decision. C. Wrong decision. D. Type 1 error. Content. Section 1. Statistical decisions. Decisions that are made about a population on the basis of simple information are called statistical decisions. In attempting to reach decisions, it is useful to make assumptions or guesses about the larger population involved. Such assumptions, which are open to be accepted or rejected, are called statistical hypotheses. The null hypothesis. A proposition that is formulated for the sole purpose of rejecting or accepting it based on the result of a statistical test is called a null hypothesis. The null hypothesis is often denoted by H0. The alternative hypothesis. Any hypothesis that differs from a null hypothesis is called an alternative hypothesis. It is in fact a negation of the null hypothesis. It is sometimes called the research hypothesis, denoted by H1. Thus, we can denote a hypothesis as a proposition about an assumed relationship between two or more variables. Test of hypothesis and significance. If after conducting a statistical test, we discover that the observed result is different remarkably from the expected result under the hypothesis, then we would be inclined to reject or accept the hypothesis. Procedures that enable us to determine whether observed sample differ significantly from the result expected and thus help us decide whether to accept or reject hypothesis are called test of hypothesis, test of significance, or decision rules. Components of a good hypothesis. Leonard Chapney, 1995. Identify the following as components of a good hypothesis. 1. A good hypothesis must be politically relevant. 2. It must be plausible or it must make a good deal of sense. 3. It must be positive and non-tautological. By positive, we mean simply that, as a matter of technical style, they must be stated as propositions rather than asked as questions. Are women more likely to vote than men? Is a question and not a hypothesis. By tautology, we mean statements that are true by definition, e.g., rich people have more money than poor people, or belligerent nations are more likely to go to war than peaceful nations, are tautological statements. 4. It must be addressed to a single set of cases, e.g., military regimes are more likely to spend higher on defense than civilian regimes. In this hypothesis, the dependent variable is defense expenditure. The independent variable is regime type. Cases are the nation states. What component 4 is saying is that the states whose defense expenditure are considered must be the same set of states whose regime type are considered. 5. A good hypothesis must encompass more than one case, and the cases must fall into more than one category on the independent variable. E.g., in the hypothesis, the rise of Hitler in Germany altered the course of world history is a good hypothesis that cannot be tested comparatively. Obviously, we cannot compare several words where Hitler rose. Chapman, 1995, page 47. Note that a variable may be independent in some hypotheses and dependent in others. Type 1 and Type 2 errors. If we reject a hypothesis when it should be accepted, we say that a Type 1 error has been made. On the other hand, if we accept a hypothesis when it should be rejected, we say that a Type 2 error has been made. In either case, a wrong decision or error in judgment has occurred. H not true. Accept. Right decision. Reject. Type 1 error. H not false. Accept. Type 2 error. Reject. Right decision. Note that Type 1 error is more serious than Type 2 error. The student should now perform the following tasks. In the few hypotheses given below, you should identify the dependent, independent variables and the case involved. The solution to the first one has been provided. You can follow the same format. 1. States with higher per capita income spend a larger proportion of their budget on education than states with lower per capita income. Independent variable is equal to per capita income. Dependent variable is equal to proportion of budget devoted to education. Cases is equal to states. 2. States with higher rates of unemployment are likely to also have higher crime rates. 3. Nations with unequal income distribution are less likely to be democracies than nations with more equal income distribution. Level of significance. In testing a given hypothesis, the maximum probability with which we would be willing to risk a Type 1 error is called the level of significance. It is either 0.05, 5% or 0.01, 1% in practice. If 0.05 significance level is chosen in designing a decision rule, then there are about 5 chances in 100 that we would reject the hypothesis when it should be accepted. That is, we are about 95% confident that we have made the right decision. Steps to be taken in hypothesis testing. You may adopt the following steps when testing a hypothesis. 1. Make a null hypothesis H0. 2. Make an alternative hypothesis H1. 3. Choose a suitable test statistics. It could be a t-test, z-test, chi-square test, correlation, f-test, etc. 4. State the level of significance denoted by alpha, e.g. 5% or 1%. 5. Determine the degree of freedom depending on the test statistics you are using. 6. Evaluate your result by comparing computed value with tabulated value. 7. Make decisions based on 3, 4, and 5 above. If calculated value is greater than tabulated value, reject H0. If calculated value is less than tabulated value, accept H0. 8. Interpret your result by giving the relevant social implications. Summary. A hypothesis is a proposition about an assumed relationship between two or more variables. A null hypothesis is often made for the sole purpose of accepting or rejecting it based on the result of a statistical test. A good hypothesis must be politically relevant, plausible, non-tautological, and adheres to a single set of cases. Type 1 and Type 2 errors are those errors committed when a wrong decision is made. The level of significance is the maximum probability with which the researcher is willing to risk a Type 1 error. This is the end of Studies Section 11. Thanks for listening.